Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Welcome to Street Talk. Episode Alpha. The Rise of Bologna.
So a lot of people are saying that Luke now is going to be written out, and we're not going to see Luke again. Like that was the last time you'll see Luke. So what do you guys feel about that?
I think it might. Yeah, sounds about right. Honestly, I think like his part of the storyline is over, but there could be a lot. They could do a lot of like post episode 6, where we don't know about why he started. Like he just said, "Hey, I want to start." And like I don't know about the books post 6, but as far as the movies and storylines go, there's nothing there.
Yeah, and because like Shadow of the Empire was pre-6, it was like post 5, and it was like between 5 and 6, right? I believe. So like all the stuff with like that green guy and Chewbacca getting killed by a moon, I think was during that. But that's already erased. And then so basically Luke's storyline with the council or his thing getting all muffed up and killed. So that's done. But what about returning as a ghost, Force ghost? See that possibility?
Well, we already seen that in the sequels. He came back as a Force ghost.
Well, sure, but Obi-Wan came back every movie as a ghost.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Voice first time, and then a ghost second time, 2 times.
Yeah, as much as Alec Guinness hated Star Wars, I imagine he rolled over in his grave every time they brought him.
Well, because again, if Luke Skywalker storyline's done, I'm happy with that too. It's like that's as long as
they could also cover the training beforehand, so they can even cover the training where he was actually training Leia to be a Jedi and why she left. So it could be like a 2-parter with him and Leia. They could do that whole training.
Yeah, it's just like one of those things that a lot of people always, like you were saying earlier when we were talking, like people don't even like the sequels, which again, I'm fine with them. I understand why people don't like them. I do. But a lot of people that don't, I don't think they're going to want to watch anything pre that, knowing if it's Luke specifically and Leia, because it's going to go with, they always know how it's going to go now. So it's like, but yeah, okay, let's move on from Luke then.
I think he's pretty much done.
Okay, very good. So next one, this is a big one. The High Republic, the new stuff from the High Republic, like the book and the comic book. Basically, they just came out from the Star Wars story group, whatever it's called, before the prequels. So all this is basically showing like when Yoda was still training almost. It's about 100 years before Episode 1. And so what they're doing though is they're telling different countries different stories. So like if you're in China, you'll be told a very specific story, and if you're America, you'll get a story about Yoda, but they might be contradictory. So like their teachings are different. Is that interesting or good for the person, the audience? What do you think that's good for? Who do you think it's best for?
I think it's bad in general, mainly because if you actually look at the back history of Disney, they've supported some pretty radical regimes. Like, say, for instance, World War II, they actually supported Hitler and them stuff. Like, there's actually cartoons basing that they actually support.
Yeah, I know, that's terrible. But they've kind of admitted that, and, they even put that stuff, like, on their Disney Plus, like, hey, this was a different time. They actually have warnings about stuff like that, saying, like, hey, this is history. But that's history. At least they don't own up to it.
But even if you look at modern day today, so I actually have friends that work at Disney, and they've actually been told to train their replacements that they're bringing in from overseas. So they replaced American workers. So they're actually getting cheaper labor from overseas coming to America over visas.
Like, that's happening across board with animation, though. That's the problem with like crunch time for games.
So for the reason behind this, in my personal opinion, is because every country has different set of laws of what they can show the public.
Right.
China is very strict. They can't have many games. They can't
Europe, same thing. Different things you see on TV. Different restrictions.
Yep. So same thing with the United States. We have different restrictions than other countries like Japan and everything. So because of this, I think they're trying to do it so they're gonna maximize profits. This might be a whole like one spin-off kind of its own universe kind of thing, and each one's gonna be its own universe.
Yeah.
I kind of think it makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna step back to a different Disney title, Mulan. When the first Mulan movie came out, which was an animated, beloved movie in the United States.
Oh, not so much loved over there.
It was very poorly received in China because it didn't fit their cultural norms and history.
They got pissed at Mushu.
When the new Mulan came out, which was much more accurate to the Chinese historical view of it, it was not as well liked in the United States. So creating a movie such as Star Wars, which really is non-cultural specific, but you can really steer it towards that. I mean, you can set it up so that maybe in China you have different characters and kind of a different storyline. In India, maybe you'll have different characters and a different storyline. Maybe in Russia, the empire is a little bit less Putin-esque. So there's a lot of options here. And as a company that is wise in the world and attempting to maximize its profits, to create unique storylines to reflect the cultural differences of these areas, to ensure that the audience in those areas are buying in and supporting it, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now,
from a business standpoint, I totally agree with you.
Now, when those start colliding, because of course it's a global economy and people from all over the world are going to see them and start arguing that my way is better than your way.
That's the problem. Yeah.
But and Disney can just say, tough. It's a story. None of it's real.
Well, that's also okay. So here's why I'm doing Tree Talk, though, is a lot of people take those stories seriously and they mean something to them. Because some people don't have good upbringings, or they don't have good families. Some people don't have families or friends at all. They read Star Wars as their hope, a shining beacon of creativity. So again, I agree with you on everything, Ben. Honestly, I do. And obviously, the only thing I don't agree with, like Gino, same thing. The only thing I don't agree with you on Gino is like it is not a problem. It is okay. It's just a story. But if you love Luke Skywalker and then someone that you meet, from, let's say, a different country, any other country, they come in and Luke Skywalker's the main villain. How do you ever, see eye to eye that person if you grew up knowing that your hero is a villain to someone else?
So this is an interesting concept because I'm part of the military. So I actually travel the world, and we actually, one of the things you would actually talk to about the local are things like this, like Star Wars and everything in common.
Right.
You actually find a lot of common ground, and you become very quickly acquainted with each other. You build actually good friendships through storylines like this, like Star Wars, that's worldwide and everything like that.
Yeah.
But when you start changing it and start making, now if there's subtle differences, hey, this character's just tweaked a certain way,
or different stories. If they're, like Ben said, if they're actually doing just completely different stories in the same universe, but they're catering to that culture, that's beautiful. That's the way I think. Yeah, because then you can when you go to another country and you get a whole new Star Wars story there. Like, oh, cool. But if it's contradictory, that's where it's like, oh, come on, guys. Like the whole sequel trilogy did do a lot of contradiction. Like they introduced force healing, for God's sake. Where it's like, wait a minute. Hold on.
So actually, because you watched the Clone Wars,
and
there was actually part of the Clone Wars. They actually talked about that.
Right.
That was part of one of the actual avenues of Jediism was to be able to go into force healing.
Yeah, no, I know. And also because she's a Sith. I mean, she's not a Jedi, so the Sith have the power of rage, and they can actually bring things back to life. That's what Palpatine was talking about, that's even a deeper conversation about Rey Skywalker. Or Rey Palpatine.
The overpowered.
That's okay.
Again,
it's one of those things where it's like a lot of people when they talk about like Rey, I think they're coming from a very specific point of view, and for me, I'm coming from another one. So it's like, that's a whole conversation that I do plan on having. And like I said,
and I don't think the stories would be terribly different. There might be nuances in there. Different people cast in same types of characters so that the people relate better, and the overall story is the same. And maybe, because in some of the Americanized versions of these, you might have characters of homosexual relationships, whereas in other cultures, those are completely
Speaking of homosexual relationships, it's MagicBologna.
So from things that are more controversial in some cultures that kept the main storyline, it would be more accepted.
I can understand where they might be doing different actors or something like that, because if you watch those shows, because they came from overseas, their voice slipping is so off, it's kind of irritating to watch. So if they're making a whole new it is. They're good TV, but it's so irritating to watch. It's like watching Japanese kung fu movies.
What do you mean? That's the best movie. Those are the best movies. Are you kidding me?
It's like, oh great.
All right, let's move on from here before we get in trouble. Okay.